So the time is here to discuss the snubbing of Denis Villeneuve and Dune Part 1. So, good news and bad news. Good news, Dune did get a lot of Oscar nominations. Bad news, Denis himself for director was not nominated. He did get a nomination for the adapted screenplay, along with the two other writers, but if you know Oscar history and film history, that's kind of like insulting him, but not insulting him completely. And the categories are not terrible. They're mostly behind the scenes, sound, makeup, editing. Those are all worthy. Again, Dune was a collective project. It's good those people are going to get recognized and hopefully win. And even though I'm not a big fan of the score myself, I can legitimately see Hans Zimmerman getting a nomination. But on the whole, this is still pretty shocking that none of the actors, none of them, not Stellan, Javier, Rebecca, Oscar, Timothée, not a single one got a nomination. None of them. Not supporting actor, not supporting actress, not main actor, not main actress. No actor nominations whatsoever, no director nominations. It's pretty shocking on the whole what was left out. But looking at the glass half full, it's still pretty good. It's really gotten a record number, really. It's in pretty good competition with Lord of the Rings and Titanic. So it's in rare space in getting that number of nominations, but yeah, it is still a little weird. On the whole, this is good news because it does show the Academy is much less hostile to science fiction and genre filmmaking in a certain way. So they're much more open to fantasy, as seen with 2001: A Space Odyssey and Lord of the Rings by Peter Jackson. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of those films. I think they're much more flawed than a lot of people assume, either from a tour cinema angle or even fantasy film angle. But there's no doubt those were magnificent achievements in many levels, even if I think they're fatally flawed. So Dune getting this number of nominations is kind of a step forward, and Denis was very polite. He did the usual, oh, it's an honor to be nominated. I don't care if we win, it's just an honor to be nominated. In reality, it's kind of insulting, but there we are. Now, as far as why this happened, well, again, I want to be paid for doing this, for doing online commentary, so I'm going to explain the rules of the game very briefly. It's not that hard, but it's really shocking to most people, but essentially your chances to win and even get nominated increase heavily the longer you're at the end of the year. In other words, closer you are to November, December, January, your chances of being nominated increase exponentially. There are a lot of reasons for this, the way the Academy works with the voting members. But long story short, it's basically just because people are lazy, and it's easier to promote those films at the end of the year, get people to see the films, and then get nominated, and then win. Whereas Dune just came out a few months before December, so apparently a lot of Academy members were just very lazy or not well motivated, or Legendary and or Warner Brothers didn't want to spend the money to market the film to these Academy voters, so it may have just lost by a few votes, but it did lose. So there we are. So if you're into the politics of Oscars, yeah, you're better off just releasing the film very close to the end of the year. That's just how it works. And in further news, he has finally given us a few details about what will happen with Dune Part 2. Some of this is good, some of this is bad, some of this is just puzzling. Because the way he explains it is that Part 1 was focused on Paul. Okay, that makes sense. But he says it was about the Bene Gesserit. But going through a lot of the channels and videos, a lot of people still don't know what the Bene Gesserit were or are. So if the plan was to explain the Bene Gesserit to set up the Harkonnens in Part 2, well, it didn't really succeed. A lot of the world building, to me, still felt a little bit weak in Part 1. But he says Part 2 will give us a lot more details and a lot more of the Harkonnens. Now, what does he mean by this? He's not exactly clear. Of course, he has to not give away all the mysteries for Part 2, but obviously we know he means Fade, or Fayed, or Fayed, as I like to call him. I'm not Arabic, but you can call him different ways. Anyway, so he's obviously mentioning Fayed or Fade, but I would hope he also means the Beast, because we didn't really get a lot of him. He was in there, he was doing things like killing people, but not really much of the complex psychology. I understand with the Baron, yeah, they couldn't show too much, so they had to be very careful. Didn't want to overuse him. I thought Stellan did come off very lethal and very powerful, but I still prefer the Lynch version. The best version is really the sci-fi version, which mixes enough of his lethal, like his lethality, but also his sheer silliness, because he is kind of a silly character. He's not meant to be super serious all the time. He makes a lot of ridiculous mistakes in the books, but that's my opinion of it. So we're going to get a lot more with the Baron, the Beast, and Fade. But how much, doing what, he's not saying. And we are finally going to get a lot more details with the Fremen. That's really good. So on the whole, a lot of good stuff is going to be happening with part 2, but again, we haven't even gotten the casting announcements. How much of the Emperor are we going to get? How much of Urielon are we going to get? How much of the kind of court politics with the other houses? Are we going to get really much more of the economics, the guild? It's a lot of unanswered questions, but a lot of reasons to be confident. And I understand he wants to hold some things back to be surprises for the movie audience. But if they are going to move away from the books, I hope to give a little bit more detailed psychology to the Beast. I thought he's still a little too simplistic. But with Faid, yeah, they really have a wide open canvas because they've disrupted the way the narrative flows in the books because he's right there at the beginning. So I don't know. It could go either way. His casting has so far been very impressive, but I don't know. Denis also likes to do some weird ass casting too, so fingers crossed they make the right choice on this one. And there we are with the Oscar controversy and the Harkonnens in Dune Part 2. Thank you for listening.